Greetings. Happy Friday. Welcome to today's Steve Deace Show here on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre, joined by our good friend, the editor of Newsweek, Josh Hammer. He'll be joining us here in a matter of moments for the Deace Group, and we are brought to you by our friends over at Preborn. Where else can you save or spend just $28 to save a life today? Because even with Bidenflation, that's all it costs for an ultrasound at Preborn that has at least 50-50 odds of saving a life. And really two lives, because we're not just talking about the baby, but we're talking about the mama and the mistake, maybe the life-altering mistake that she will make by murdering her child. Preborn is out there with clinics. They're out there on the streets. They confront moms. It's gentle, but it's a confrontation. These are moms either leaning towards, considering, maybe even hell-bent on murdering their children. They confront them with an ultrasound so that they hear that heartbeat, so that they know that's not a glob of tissue. It's a person. And it's its own person. You don't have two heartbeats. That's a separate heartbeat. And then when mom, if her conscience is pricked and mom chooses life, that's now when they bring the mercy, they bring the grace. They're there in support of her pre and post birth, sometimes up to 2 years after birth. Car seats, diapers, formula, even counseling. All of it free of charge, even though it's not free. They need tax-deductible donations to fund this all from people like us. And here at The Blaze, you guys have been great. You've helped us save tens of thousands of babies through Preborn. Let's save even tens of thousands more. Make a tax-deductible donation today at preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. Also want to let you know this debuted yesterday, episode 2 of The Cover-Up, the outstanding miniseries that Matt Kibbe is doing here at The Blaze, looking at some of the biggest issues covered up by the COVID regime. This week, with this new episode, it is about the origins of the virus, and my goodness, does Senator Rand Paul, he is featured in this episode. He brings the receipts. He flat out accuses Anthony Fauci of being, and his department of being responsible for the creation of the virus and crimes against humanity. You do not want to miss this. It is absolutely fantastic. You can get it today if you subscribe to Blaze TV at FauciCoverup.com/Deace, my last name. FauciCoverup.com/Deace. If you use the code FauciLied, you'll get $30 off an annual subscription to Blaze TV. That's our biggest discount ever, so that you can watch it now. Fauci Lied is the discount code at FauciCoverup.com/Deace. All right, next hour, it will be time for some Feedback Friday, but let's get it rolling with the Deace Group. There's our man Josh. Good to see you again, brother. Let's get to it. Your weekly look at the week that was begins, as it always does, with issue 1. Bleep, Lord Nefarious says.
Whoa, wait a minute.
I would say those first days, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could, because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
A society that does not put equity and inclusion at the center of it is certainly going to eventually come to the places where we're at. The moment that those folks who are out there demanding this are not going to take a commission or a report, they're going to want fundamental change. It's one of the exciting things in the midst of all this.
Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
Don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness.
Well, J.D. Vance has criticized him as never having been in combat. And,
has he?
Well,
has J.D. Vance been in combat?
Well, I think he was over in Iraq, I think, as a public relations officer, as a communications officer. I think that's the case.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech.
The offence of incitement to racial hatred involves publishing or distributing material which is insulting or abusive, which is intended to or likely to start racial hatred. So if you retweet that, then you're republishing that, and then potentially you're committing that offence. And we do have dedicated police officers who are scouring social media. Their job is to look for this material and then follow up with identification, arrests, and so forth.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Kick it to Congress, so it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025 to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified, and then we need bodyguards for everybody in Civil War conditions.
And my record is so pro-choice, Nancy Pelosi asked me if I should tone it down. I stand with Planned Parenthood, and we won.
Let me know how high it is. If it's 25 feet, then I'll invest in the 30-foot ladder factory.
Should Minnesota be a sanctuary state?
If the definition of that is that the federal government enforces immigration law and local law enforcement enforces local law, then yes.
Should cities be allowed to be sanctuary cities?
Yes.
It's done.
A packed room at the St. Paul Armory erupted after the governor's signature made driver's license for all the law of the land.
There, that's better.
This will be the biggest worldview difference election I have ever voted in. Exhibit A. B, C, D. Todd, I'll begin with you. First question goes to you. The most debased thing you just saw was what and why?
Well, Tim Walz's entire existence, for starters, but that British dude giving you the full Orwell. Just
we're scouring the internet.
Yes. No winking and nodding, just giving it to you. Bending you over, grabbing you by the hair, and giving you the full Orwell. And not just in some sort of utopian sense. Right now, he's giving it to you while Muslims are burning down their town. And you aren't allowed to raise your hand and say, point of order. I mean, breathtaking.
Aaron.
That was the second version, as I was telling you about. I made a previous version as well that was not as bad as that one. I don't know where to begin. Let's begin at the very beginning. Gwen Walz. You can tell a lot about a candidate by their what? Family, their wives. She has a thing for essence of burning tires because it provides her absolution in some weird, twisted, demented, psychotic way. It's a touchstone. It provides her absolution from her white guilt by leaving the windows at the governor's mansion open so you can smell the wonderful aroma of burning tires as your city is on fire from race rioters. Absolution. I absolve you. No, that's just psychotic. It is absolutely psychotic. And I believe the Walz family, especially Tim, is a psychopath. And I'll have more on that in my prediction coming up later on this hour.
Josh, we have you back. There you go, brother. What was the absolute most debased thing in Aaron's montage that you just saw?
Yeah, Steve, I've had the privilege, frankly, of doing these Deace groups for a few years now. That might have been the most demonic one I've ever seen. And it says a lot about Tim Walz that it was literally...
And we lost him again.
Did we lose him again?
Yeah.
We got him back?
I think
there
so.
He is. Go
there
ahead.
he is.
All right, try it again.
The most demonic thing ever.
Yeah, take it from there, Josh.
And, like 80 to 90% of that was just Tim Walz. I mean, that says a lot in and of itself. But look, I was going to comment on the British situation, which I have friends in London text me about it, which is just utterly unfathomable. I mean, the cradle of the Western world's liberty is now threatening to prosecute anyone who happens to call the prime minister two-tier Kier because he has this two-tier system of defense where he is defending mosques but not churches and synagogues. But I see that Todd has handled that. I want to just focus on something else that happened this week, which is related to and also just closely adjacent to the Tim Walz thing, which is the fact that Josh Shapiro was not selected for Kamala Harris's running mate. This is an important point to make here. Josh Shapiro was, if you could basically grow a Kamala Harris running mate in a petri dish, it would be Josh Shapiro. I mean, this is a guy who won his gubernatorial race in 2022 over Doug Mastriano by double digits in Pennsylvania, the #1 most electoral college votes of any battleground state. This is someone who continues to have a very high approval rating basically across the board there in Pennsylvania. I'm not saying he's a moderate. He's obviously a pretty liberal guy. But it is the world's worst kept secret that there is one reason and one reason only that Josh Shapiro was not selected to be Kamala Harris's running mate. And it's not the fact that he is quote unquote pro-Israel. His stance on the conflict is certainly not my stance. It's probably not your guys' stance either. He basically has the exact same position on the Middle East as I think any of the other contenders. It is literally the fact that his name is Josh Shapiro, that he has a very stereotypically sounding Jewish name. Like that is disgusting. I mean, that should cause everyone just to utterly kind of go back and flinch. Like, oh my God, like what is happening in America right now in the year 2024 that this is actually happening? The Democratic Party had Joe Lieberman running with Al Gore 24 years ago. Now they can't get the most important state's popular governor. It makes no sense. But picking Tim Walz over Josh Shapiro is just totally inexplicable by any calculus other than that. So I think that has to be it. So for all of the dens of iniquity that we just saw in that montage, and there were a lot, I think the fact that Kamala Harris did not pick Josh Shapiro and went with the prairie socialist Tim Walz really is the most demonic thing that happened this entire week.
I mean, I was blown away, and I don't get shocked very often, unfortunately, these days. But at the gym 3 weeks ago, they've got CNN on one of the monitors, and John King literally just says out loud, well, they can't pick Josh Shapiro, he's Jewish. Just says it out loud, on like it's just casual analysis or conversation. And I think what they're telling you, I think it was going to be Josh Shapiro, Josh Hammer. I do. I think that the leak last week was a test. I think that was from the Philadelphia mayor. I think that they were testing out to see. I don't think they were going to do a rally in Pennsylvania to announce the governor of another state. Okay, I think it was going to be Josh Shapiro. I think that got leaked out. And I think the Hamas caucus, the CARE caucus, just told the party, listen, y'all, okay, remember Chicago 68, what the hippies did to your convention? They're the JV team. Okay, we've been doing this for 1,200 years, all right? Y'all have not seen a convention burnt to the ground until you put one of those Jews on a national ticket, particularly one that could be a future standard bearer for your party moving forward. I mean, we will make Chicago 68 look like a trip to Disneyland before they, had tranny actors playing Snow White. I think that's what happened. And I think that's why they went to Tim Walz. I think that they had to go to somebody who did. That's why they couldn't pick Mark Kelly to a lesser degree, because you're not getting elected dog catcher statewide in Arizona if you're for like open borders on every issue. And so they couldn't pick him because to a lesser degree, that was going to upset another one of their demonic constituencies. So they had, who's a guy that represents all our demonic constituencies and won't be a threat to anybody and is willing to expend his political capital with Kamala Harris in ways Gretchen Whitmer doesn't want to have to. It's this guy. That's why they picked him. You agree or disagree with that, Josh?
Yeah, look, no, I totally agree with everything you said, Steve. I mean, this rally was going to be in Philadelphia. Okay, the mayor's video mysteriously leaks. Maybe it's not so mysterious. I mean, maybe that actually was exactly what you just suggested which is basically a poll test. I mean, what they probably did, either before or after that video was they literally just poll tested their base, and they said that no, I mean, like, the fear mongers are true. Like picking someone with a very Jewish name is actually going to fracture this party. The convention's coming up in Chicago, which we all know. The mayor there is a literal socialist, Mayor Johnson there. They can't have a Jew on the ticket. That is just disgusting. I mean, and I say that as someone who disagrees with Josh Shapiro on basically every issue that I can possibly think of there. But the fact that that is happening in America right now is just shocking. And, you know, frankly, there was this new poll that I saw out of New York State that showed Trump actually winning the Jewish vote in New York State, the biggest Jewish population, 50-49. I can tell you guys anecdotally, you know, my more liberal family members who might have otherwise been inclined to vote for Biden or Harris, they're all voting for Trump. So, I mean, I have some anecdotal, not proof, but some anecdotal evidence to kind of back up these polls as well. It's going to be fascinating to see. But at this point, the Democratic Party seems to be institutionally anti-Semitic from what I can tell.
Just to quantify this for non-Jews, I won't mention the name, but you and I have a mutual friend, Josh, who I think it's a sister or sister-in-law, was in line for like a top 5% of all med students in America, med school scholarship. But it was going to require her going to school in New York. She turned that down and took a lesser educational opportunity in Florida instead because she knew she didn't think she was going to be safe or protected there. This is 2024 America, guys, not 1932 Germany, okay? Let's get to the exit question on a scale of 1 to 10. With 1 being the odds, Kamala Harris did not sleep with men to get to where she got. And 10 being the odds, Lindsey Graham got to where he is just so he could sleep with men. Rank this week's level of total depravity, Todd.
That was a Cheshire cat smile from Josh right there. I just show up for work when Josh is on just so I can see him enjoy this. Yeah, that's a 10.
Josh?
You guys know I love the Lindsey Graham jokes. Yeah, that is a full 10 out of 10 if there ever were one.
Aaron?
10.
Thank you. Before we get to issue 2, don't forget about our friends over at realestateagentsitrust.com. First of all, if you are choosing, not because you have to, but because you're desiring to get involved in this real estate market, thoughts and prayers, okay? Make sure you dare not attempt to, in these unprecedented times.
Bing, 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 bing.
Make sure you dare not attempt to navigate the murky waters of the cringy Kamala real estate market without an agent you can trust. Where would you find them? The name says it all. realestateagentsitrust.com. It's where our database of agents that we have vetted around the country so that we've got verified track records of success to recommend to you can be found. And a lot of times these are agents that are going to come from right here in this audience, so you guys have values in common as well. Again, no matter where you need to go, whether it's across town or across the country, you want to get to the finish line with a dub. We'll find an agent that can help you do exactly that at realestateagentsitrust.com. Again, realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, let's get to issue 2 here, war.
It's now been over a week since, we think, Israel took out 2 major leaders of Hezbollah and Hamas, respectively. The latter, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, was reportedly assassinated inside of his Tehran, Iran residence via an explosive device that had been planted weeks in advance of his visit to the Iranian capital for the swearing in of that country's new president. Iranian Ayatollah Khamenei, in the aftermath, has brandished his typical tough rhetoric, but as of this moment, no major action has been taken in retaliation against Israel. Israel has not taken responsibility officially for the assassination of Haniyeh.
So, Josh, I want to get you in your perspective on something we discussed here amongst the 3 of us on the show earlier this week. You know, much is being made, and I think rightfully so, about the opening Islamofascists and the Iranian regime, but I repeat myself, are seeing with the current team that we have in place here in the United States. And that Israel, at the very least, is a redheaded stepchild right now, if not isolated by our own government. And therefore, they can foresee that there's a window here. I mean, we have at least 150 some odd days, even if the election goes our way, before Trump could be inaugurated. So there's a window here for them to act, right? I mean, a lot's been made about that. But we kind of discussed this on the show, and it organically came up. Isn't the other side of this true, too? Isn't the inverse true? For example, if you're Bibi Netanyahu, and you've been slow played on weapons and everything else, you come to give a speech before Congress, and the people you represent in the last 40 years have voted on an average of 71% of the time for Democrats, and over 50 House Democrats refuse to come to your speech, okay? And their seats are occupied by other people. You see that the current party in power in the United States is willing to destabilize its own country, willing to open borders in its own country, okay? Willing to criminalize its political opposition in its own country, willing to get a coups against its own presidential candidates if they don't think they can win, willing to just nullify the votes of millions of primary voters if they don't have the result that they want. And if you're Bibi Netanyahu and you have been warning about Iran and Islamofascism longer than you and Aaron have ever been alive, and you've been through some of your own mistakes and other things people have tried to do to you. You've been exiled, you've been impeached, you've been resurrected. All right, and this is your last lap around the track. And you also know there's only 150, there's more than 150 days till Trump could get reinaugurated, even if he wins. You may be also saying to yourself, we have to act. We are isolated here. We cannot count on U.S. diplomacy and force of will pressure. We may have to unilaterally act here on our own. We may have to take advantage of this window. That is an angle I've not heard it communicated as much on the other side of this. What are your thoughts?
So there's a few things I think to kind of unpack here. So the timing of these strikes against the Hamas and Hezbollah leaders, including Ismail Haniyeh, who's been Hamas's #1 guy for literal years now. The timing is very interesting because it came basically right after Netanyahu's trip to Washington, D.C., after he gave the speech to Congress, after he had the meetings with Biden and Harris. And we all know that whether it was publicly reported or not, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris told Netanyahu, cool down here, de-escalate this, that, which obviously sends the complete wrong message to America's own enemies, such as Iran and whatnot. But my own take on the timing of this, the taking out of Hezbollah and Hamas officials so close to this U.S. trip, I think what Israel was doing, yes, they obviously were taking out people who have Israeli and also American blood on their hands. I mean, the Hezbollah official who was taken out was one of the leading masterminds of the Beirut barracks bombing back in 1983. So, yes, it was part of that. But I think the more interesting angle here is that the timing was actually also a message that I think Israel was trying to send to Arab countries. They were trying to send a message, I think, to Saudi Arabia, to the UAE, to Bahrain, basically saying, okay, the United States is not going to have your back when it comes to the Iranian threat. They're not going to do anything about the Houthis in Yemen disrupting shipping, cratering the Saudi economy with all the Red Sea lanes and all that. Actually, no, it's Israel. It's actually Israel that is willing to defend the region's collective interest in holding accountable, as you accurately put it, the Islamo-fascist regime in Tehran. So I think that's one of the angles here. As far as the January 2025, who's getting sworn in there, look, Netanyahu would obviously strongly prefer that any serious action take place with Trump in office for fairly obvious reasons. I do not see the possibility, certainly before November, of Israel getting more aggressive inside Iran itself. The more interesting possibility is with Hezbollah, the Iranian proxy in Lebanon. Hezbollah is a serious military. I mean, they have 100,000 roughly precision-guided missiles. I mean, they make Hamas look like child's play. So an Israel-Hezbollah war would be very ugly. I mean, you would see Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, I mean, the major cities under direct fire in a way that Israel has not been probably ever, actually, in its entire history. So even then, Bibi would strongly prefer that Trump be there in office, but he literally might not have a choice. That thing is getting dicier and dicier by the day, every minute by minute. We wait to see what kind of response Nasrallah and Hezbollah do to the assassination in Beirut a couple weeks ago. So he might not have a choice there. But when it comes to Iran itself, I don't see any kind of preemptive strike on an Iranian nuclear facility, for instance.
Okay. So that's a different perspective from what we were discussing earlier this week. Gentlemen, who wants to go next in response to what Josh just said with his analysis?
Well, in terms of should he feel alone, I think it's rational and wise for him to feel more alone than the nation of Israel has ever felt before. Like, I don't know how many, and maybe Josh knows, how many degrees of separation there are in terms of the access to the nuclear football there. But every single enemy of Israel there in the Middle East should feel that window is more narrow than ever before. That, unlike in the past where we're going to defend ourselves, we will fight you off, But now we may. I don't know if Israel has ever actually. Has Israel ever been closer to the choice where it has to make the decision on our existence versus theirs? I would say
that's a great question. Let's get.
I would
Josh's
say the answer is no.
Josh, how would you answer that?
Probably not since the bombing of the Osirak facility in Iraq in the early 1980s, when the IDF took out Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor in Iraq. So it's probably been 4 decades. Look, Israel is not going to allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon to the absolute extent of their abilities. Now, I should point out, there are some actual tangible on-the-ground limitations to what the Israeli military can do. So, for example, only the U.S. really has developed these so-called bunker buster bombs that can actually get 150 to 200 feet, yards, whatever the metric is, below the surface there. Iran buries a lot of their nuclear facilities that far underground. So there's been some legislation in Congress trying to fast-track the shipment of those weapons, probably not going to get signed by this president. So there are some actual structural impediments to Israel being able to do what, in the long run, probably has to be done.
Aaron?
Yeah, that's an evergreen tweet, that last sentence there. Mm-hmm. From Iran's perspective, now they came out and said, after the report, I think it was in New York Times, saying that this was an explosive device planted weeks ahead of time in that Tehran, I believe it was a Tehran, Iran building room where Hania was staying and sleeping. I don't know. If you're Iran right now, if you're the Ayatollah Khomeini, aren't you looking behind your shoulder right now? How in the world does that happen? I mean, think of the levels that you had to know. Where he was, what country he was in, which maybe isn't that hard. You had to know when he was going to be, where he was going to be, the city where he was going to be, when he was going to be there, the building he was in, the room in the building he was going to be in. And, you got to smuggle in an explosive device weeks in advance? I don't know. These are absolutely psychotic people, sociopathic people running Iran. But I have to think they might, again, as we're sitting here today, no major retaliation thus far, although the saber rattling has continued. Don't you think they have to be kind of looking behind their shoulder now? Because that has to be haunting that they were able to get this accomplished inside their own capital city.
All right, Josh, what's your reaction to that here in about 90 seconds?
Yeah, I think that Aaron nailed it. I mean, this reveals, an entire lack of ability to police their own house guests. I mean, Ismail Hania was there. I mean, Hania typically lives in Doha, Qatar. So he was literally just in Tehran to attend the inauguration ceremony of the new president. What this basically says is that the regime in Tehran is incapable of even safeguarding their own house guests there. It's really an incredible story. I mean, we don't actually know yet whether or not this bomb was planted months in advance or whether or not it happened a matter of days before. There's been conflicting reports on that. But Mossad and Israel in general, at this point, it's not a very well-kept secret, have pretty free operation when it comes to their military capacity inside Iran, which is an incredible thing and really ought to make Iran shiver there. But look, I don't see a full war happening with Israel and Iran anytime soon. I do think it's going to get even hotter than it is with Hezbollah. But even there, Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, which again is a direct Iranian proxy, he doesn't want a full war either, because if it actually gets down to dropping bombs for bomb on each side, Israel can basically take out Beirut if need be. So I don't think it's going to be a full-scale regional war or anything like that. I really don't.
All right, that brings us to our exit question then. There are exactly 163 days until Trump could potentially be sworn in as president. If your level of fear of full-scale war in the Middle East during that time were the title of an AC/DC song, which AC/DC song title would it be? A, if you want blood, you got it. B, who made who? C, have a drink on me. Aaron.
What does who made who mean?
Uncertain.
I'm who made who.
Todd.
B, but a lot closer to A than C.
Josh.
I'm also B.
Okay. I've got less than a minute. Can you give me an answer, Josh, for our audience? How real is the youth resistance to the Ayatollahs in Iran, generationally? How real is that?
It's partially a generational thing. It's also partially just a basic demographic thing. I mean, this regime took power in the revolution in 79. They've never been a good fit for the Iranian people. People forget this. Israel was founded in 1948. For the first 3 decades of Israel's existence, the regime of the Shah in Iran was one of Israel's closest friends. So they've never been a good fit for each other. It's just a question as to how this ultimately unfolds in the long term. Will it come from within? Will it come from beyond? Okay. But there's been this mismatch for a long time.
Yeah, I'm asking because I'm wondering, is it possible to wait them out or not? That's what I'm asking. All right, we'll come back. More in a moment. Stay tuned.
The Steve Deace Show.
So our friends at Patriot Mobile have been on the cutting edge of building the parallel economy here in the country. One of the reasons why every time I've been at or spoken at a conservative or right-of-center conference here in the last few years, they've been one of the sponsors. For example, Pigeon Forge. I was down there for the Christian CinemaCon, and the hall where we held the nefarious discussion, brought to you by Patriot Mobile. The session of the Family Leadership Summit in July, I spoke at here in Des Moines, sponsored by Patriot Mobile. So I guess it could be they just love me so much that they're following me everywhere I go. Or it is, I hope that'd actually be preferable, but I think it's because they are keeping their word. When they tell you they take the profits you give them and they prophetically reinvest them back into the kingdom, they do that. All right, they're serious about that. They are America's only American mobile phone provider. So if you want to make this switch today, take advantage of their 100% U.S.-based customer service team, which does an absolutely outstanding job. You can make the switch today. By the way, if you're a veteran or first responder, let them know when you go to make the switch because they got extra ways to tell you thank you for your service. All of us, though, can get a free month of service if we make the switch today at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Use the offer code Steve for that free month of service at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Again, patriotmobile.com/Steve. We welcome back editor over at Newsweek, Josh Hammer. We continue on here with our weekly look at the week that was. Let's get to issue 3. Is this the UK or Tim Walz' Minnesota?
Protests continue to unsettle the UK over 3 deaths and numerous injuries at a horrific stabbing attack on girls attending a dance class in Southport. The gruesome attack unfolded on Monday, July 29th at a dance class for children in the seaside town. A 17-year-old man entered the studio and stabbed the children with a knife, killing 3 and injuring many. Witnesses saw some children covered in blood as they ran away from the attack. Rumors and speculation immediately took hold on social media as police investigated the terrifying incident. Officials initially said that there was no evidence that terrorism was a motive for the attack, angering many who accused them of covering up politically incorrect evidence. Police identified the suspect as being from Cardiff, but also that his parents were Rwandan. The unrest began last Tuesday when protesters assembled outside of a mosque in Southport and chanted anti-immigration sentiments. Police intervened and some vehicles were set on fire during scuffles between police and protesters. One rumor said that the suspect had entered illegally into the country and had been on government terror watch lists, but that was specifically denied by law enforcement officials. Naturally, the focus of law enforcement officials in the UK is criminalizing and arresting people for retweeting stuff.
We have some breaking news now, and a woman has been arrested by Cheshire Police in relation to an inaccurate information on social media about the attacker in the Southport murders. It says a 55-year-old woman from near Chester was arrested earlier today, Thursday the 8th, of course, on suspicion of publishing written material to stir up racial hatred and false communications.
That report is just the next step after the Biden White House calling Twitter and saying you have to censor Alex Berenson. That's the next step. The next step is a guy named Elon Musk comes in, spends $44 billion to liberate the largest political opinion platform on planet Earth. So if you're going to do that, then I guess the next step is the state will then just come in and criminalize it. That is absolutely the next step. And you need to also understand here, this is again why this is what I'm so concerned about with this election. What's happened all throughout Europe, you see this in France, you see it in Germany, you see it in the UK. What's happened is the Hegelian dialectic is the political process now. You had a fake right there for many, many years. And it largely just now has morphed into the left. It was pointless to vote in the UK elections. If you're a non-communist, there was no point. There was literally not a fundamental difference between the two parties. There wasn't. Just one was a bunch of corporatists and one was a bunch of socialists, but they're all operating under the exact same value system. And that leaves millions of people without agency, which means when something like this happens, there's nowhere to go. The institutions are aligned against you, so I guess we're going to the streets. And that is a preview of what is to come here, too. So, Josh, I have been saying all week long, and I'll probably say this again for another 87 days. This is, and man, I'm not, again, let me say this. My movie didn't get the Sound of Freedom screening at Mar-a-Lago, okay? I'm not getting invited down there. I'm not on anybody's wish list. I didn't get some new sponsor paying our show 6 figures because I'm all in that he's got to win this election. I have gained nothing about. If anything, all Donald Trump has done for 10 years is cost me money. I lost to him on the Cruz campaign, lost to him on the DeSantis campaign. The fact that I'm not a jock sniffer has limited my own audience. Donald Trump, for me on a professional level, has done nothing but cost me money. I had to go to war against him the entire final year of he was in the White House before over COVID and the riots. I mean, I've gained nothing from this era, guys, like literally nothing. So there's no professional angle here for me. It's quite simple. I don't want that to happen to your kids and grandkids, let alone mine. That's really just as, I think New York 1992 is a better place to live than London or Minneapolis or San Francisco 2024. And it's just that damn simple for me. Nothing more, nothing less. Even if all Trump is Rudy Giuliani's 1992 New York was better than San Francisco, Minneapolis, and London 2024. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Okay?
Amen.
That's all even if that's all that is, that's a giant step better than what we're looking at right now. And that is why I have been saying, Josh, all week, this is the biggest worldview election difference or worldview difference election I've ever voted in, ever. Agree or disagree?
So, well said, first of all. Look, I lived in London for a few months, actually. I did a college semester studying over there at University College London, UCL. I'm something of a lifelong Anglophile. I mean, to this day, I actually root for England in international soccer competitions. I mean, when it's not the U.S., actually. I mean, I'm someone who's a research fellow at the Edmund Burke Foundation. I mean, that's Edmund Burke. I mean, I love all that Britain has given the world. And, frankly, if you're an American patriot, I think you have no other choice but to be grateful for what Britain has given the world, because so much of what we still have operating here in the U.S. today in the year 2024 is ultimately downstream of what Britain did 300, 400, 500 years ago. Our system of common law, separation of powers, you name it. Okay. So I say all that because that just makes it all the more painful to watch what has been going on over there for years now. I mean, obviously, it's worse now under Labour than it was under the Tories a month ago, but it wasn't exactly good under the Tories either. I mean, Boris Johnson had the whole scandal where he was holding private parties because he couldn't listen to his own COVID limits and lockdown restrictions and all that stuff. But right now what's happening in the UK, right now what's happening is what I've called on social media is the paroxysms of rage from a people whose leaders simply will not listen to them.
Correct.
And they are not listening to them on the issue, Steve, of globalization and mass migration.
Yep.
There is no one right now who is sane in the UK who is clamoring for more Islamic migration. No one wants that. By the way, they don't want it here in the U.S. either, or basically any Western country's poll that I have looked at. And unless and until elites in the UK, in the US, in Brussels, London, Berlin, Washington, Ottawa, you name it, unless and until they start listening to the people and recognize that human beings are not widgets on an economic chalkboard that cannot just be interchanged with one another to find the most efficient or the consumer welfare maximizing standard or precept, unless and until they realize that and start listening to us when it comes to the idea that cultures are not all equal, which they aren't, unless until that happens, we're going to just start seeing more of this. And God forbid, it's already started to happen a little bit here in the U.S., but it's probably only going to get worse, I fear.
Amen to every word. Todd?
I think your point is all the more stark because this is Donald Trump and not Ron DeSantis. He's just, at best, a centrist New Yorker at best, and I might be pushing that, all right? He's not some crazy ideologue, all right? That's why I think, to your point, I think this is the first Independence Day election, and I'm not talking about 1776. I'm talking about the movie. Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interests. Perhaps it's fate that today is the 4th of July and you will once again be fighting for our freedom, not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. These people hate you so much. Both the ridiculous woke left and the Muslims. Simultaneously. They plan to destroy you. Look at it. Don't Netflix and chill through it. Look at it. And then do what you got to do.
I have no idea what Trump has planned. I have no idea what he'll do. And I am confident if he wins, it'll be a coin flip every day, whether we're coming in here to say Yas King or WTF, because that's what it was like when he was president before. There were Abrahamic Accords, and then we're like, why are we still locked down? I mean, that's what it was like. Here's what I do, but I do know what they're going to do.
Yes.
And they made it very plain, and they have records, and they're not blogs. They're not things they pontificated about in college. They've won elections. She's been vice president of this administration. We saw what he did in Minnesota in one legislative session. This stuff is not theoretical. It is what they will do, period. Aaron, your thoughts?
Which is why I want to reiterate what I said earlier this week. You know, I had a buddy of mine a close friend of mine who lives in Minnesota, and he messaged me this week and he said, is it just me because I live in Minnesota, or are more people talking more about this vice presidential pick than I can remember? And I said, no, a lot of people are talking more than you can remember, and rightfully so. The guy is crazy. He's absolutely nuts. See, this is the reason why I have concentrated on Tim Walz more than I would have probably done so with Josh Shapiro or maybe fill in the blank vice presidential pick. He's an unabated communist. He's a rabid communist and a terrible human being at that as well, with the stolen valor and his history as well. But here's what I think they're telegraphing to you. We don't think that we need to hide who we are anymore. Again, this is another instance of, do we believe our own talking points over in right-wing land? For years and years, it's been, well, this is who they really are. You got in trouble multiple times for calling Barack Obama a Marxist. Oh, that's beyond the pale, didn't you, Steve?
Yes.
So now that they've actually taken the sheep's mask off and showing you who they are, what does that tell you about who they think the rest of us are? On the right and the normies. They think they don't need to hide themselves from the normies, and they're declaring war on you if you are any form of right-winger. They're basically saying, yes, that's the future that we want. Mm-hmm. You retweet the wrong thing, straight to jail. That should be terrifying.
Has any Democrat in America come forward today and said what they're doing in the UK, rounding people up for social media?
Yeah.
No! Why, guys? Why?
They like it.
They can't wait to do it
themselves.
themselves.
Because exactly right.
Tim Walz setting up the hotline to snitch on your COVID neighbor.
Yes. Hey,
calls and said, that's a great idea.
Misinformation isn't free speech. London agrees. So that is your choice. Okay? And again, there's some of you, you're living under the protection of the Godfather in Florida for another 2 years, but do you know what January 1st, 2027 looks like? Some of you think you're living in this reliable red state like Alabama. You mean the one where Kay Ivey pimped and promoted that poisonous jab more aggressively than friggin' Trump did? That one? You think you're secure from all of this. You're not. So this is the choice. New York City, 1996. Minneapolis, London, San Francisco, 2024. Those are your options. And those are dramatically different places. Dramatically. Exit question. If today were election day, what do you think would happen? Aaron.
Today, Kamala Harris.
Todd.
Narrowly the same.
Josh.
I actually think Trump.
My answer is I am glad the election is not today.
And Josh, we had you on one time when we were talking about the lawfare on the Deace Group, and you said, you kind of walked through each case and said, you know what, if you were kind of partial towards Trump. Well, that's kind of worked out so far.
Yeah. That analysis turned out to be more true than I thought it was going to be at the time. Thank you for resetting that, Aaron. Yes. All right, let's get to our kicker topic, because I do think Trump is struggling with how to brand Kamala. All right, so I would have gone with cringy Kamala from the beginning. That's what I would have done, okay? But give Trump his Kamala nickname that he desperately needs right now, Todd.
Kamapalooza.
Why that one?
Because it just sounds crazy.
Okay. Aaron?
I'm going with something I've used for years now, Kamalablity-gook.
I love it. I'm not so sure I can pull that off as a professional broadcaster, let alone doing as much media and stuff as Trump does and not getting tongue-tied saying that a million times, but I love it. Josh?
I would say Kamala the Commie or Kamala the California Commie if you want a triple alliteration.
How about just Kamala?
That works just fine.
That's good too. That's really good too.
That should be the front runner.
Kamila.
That's good too.
That's great, actually.
Yeah, and that looks good on social media posts, especially in his all caps, which annoy me. All right, let's get to the predictions. Aaron, go.
There is something weird about Tim Walz at a personal level. My prediction is, and I don't know if this will sway the outcome of the election or might not come to light until after the election, but something is going to come out about Tim Walz that he is hiding. That's going to make the egregious and now multiple examples of stolen valor look like child's play. There's just the projection that he has, that he's foisting onto that. I mean, I know that's a hallmark of leftism.
I mean, guys typically shake hands with their wives, right?
There's something weird there.
Yeah, there is something. Yeah, I hear you. Spidey sense kind of tingles there. We're talking like in a Lindsey Graham kind of way, or maybe something else.
Yes.
I gotcha. All right. I thought maybe I was picking up what you were laying down. Todd.
Between now and the election, Kamala will not do a single unscripted interview or even debate Donald Trump.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
They have to get her out of scripted situations. We have to figure out a way to do that.
Agreed, but...
Josh.
Well, that is jaw-dropping if that's true what Todd just said. I mean, if we actually do not get a single candid interview, even with a George Stephanopoulos, that is absolutely bonkers stuff, frankly. That would really just one-up the whole Joe Biden 2020 basement strategy. Anyway, my prediction, going back to my opening remarks on Josh Shapiro and that whole kerfuffle, I guess you would say. So I think part of the calculus is they are desperately trying to avoid a massive riot, demonstrations, any kind of chaos at their convention in Chicago, the vibes of 1968, all that. It's not going to work because the people that they are trying to appease, like the actual Hamas, Hezbollah wing in the Democratic Party, are not appeasable.
Right.
It's like negotiating with terrorists. I mean, you give them table scraps, they're not going to be appeased. I mean, is Joe Biden still genocide Joe in their eyes? He probably is. So I am still expecting massive chaos at the DNC, and I, for one, am very excited for it.
I think that's a solid prediction. I think mine's pretty simple. If Trump wins independence, he'll win. And if he doesn't, he'll lose. I think for all the hullabaloo, I think it's really just a traditional electorate. Josh, good to see you, man. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
You bet. We'll come back with Hour 2 and Feedback Friday here next. Stay tuned. Back here with Hour 2 here on The Blaze. I am Steve Deace with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. You are you, and you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Let us know by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com. That is DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. And then if you wouldn't mind, if you do listen to the podcast, hit subscribe, or if you're on iTunes, follow. That'll make sure that every time we do a new episode, it will show up right there in your podcast feed every single time. And then also, if you wouldn't mind this, hit subscribe or follow, which I just said. No, don't do that twice. Instead, give us a 5-star review, and that way everybody knows that you like us. Now, you may not want them to know that, but we do. So do it anyway. But then also, thank you to those of you who have. We appreciate each and every one of those, as we appreciate our friends at Backyard Butchers. If you're looking for some outstanding meat, it's still grill season, folks. And the meat at Backyard Butchers is absolutely outstanding. They are delivering American-raised, harvested meat from right here in America's backyards, ranches, and farms, direct to your dinner tables across the nation, grass-fed, grain-finished. It does taste amazing. I've tried it myself. It's fantastic. Even did a taste test. First time I tried it. I grilled up some burgers from Backyard and then also from the grocery here. And guys, this is Iowa, man. All right, we got some pretty good meat locally here, just available at the store. And the Backyard Butcher stuff was demonstrably better. Like, I thought it'd be good. I did not expect it to be that much better than the stuff at the store. And that's why they've got over 500,000 happy customers, so many 5-star reviews. And their American-based customer service team is comprised entirely of stay-at-home moms. So you know they got this stuff on lockdown. All right? So you want to get involved today? Here's what you can do. Go to backyardbutchers.com/Deace. Backyardbutchers.com/Deace. Get 20% off your entire order, and if you subscribe, you'll get an additional 10% off and free shipping as well. Backyardbutchers.com/Deace is where you want to go. All right, we're ready to go to some Feedback Friday. Y'all ready to go?
Yeah. Probably not.
Let's do this. Adam writes, your analysis of Trump's hiring pattern, that he either picks a strong, attractive woman or a softer, more submissive man. When it comes to the VP pick, did that defy the model? I mean, I think that's actually been an astute observation by you, but J.D. Vance doesn't seem to fit either type. Is this a matter of Trump realizing results are more important than ego here? Yeah. Now, I'm not so sure that we're talking the results maybe that you're thinking. But first of all, I should have noted this, just like I should have noted last hour when we had Josh on, his way more optimistic analysis of how the legal proceedings with Trump were going to go did turn out to be right. More right than ours, thankfully. But this is, the Vance thing is, and we should have noted this, that's my bad. The Vance thing is in opposition. I never said it was exclusive, but I said it was the pattern for most senior positions is attractive women with strong personalities and beta males, right? That's how I described it. And if you look at Trump's hiring pattern in his first presidential run, during his administration, and throughout much of this presidential run, that pattern, again, it's not 100%, but it's a pretty strong trend, all right? J.D. Vance is not either one of those things. He's a Marine, best-selling author, movie producer, senator, has his own very strong opinions, beliefs, which the left is trying to kill him for as we speak, okay? Frankly, he's been way more on message so far as VP than Trump has been or his campaign in the last 2 weeks. Way more. So why did Trump buck this trend? I don't think it's about this election per se. I mean, JD comes from Ohio, a state where Trump is probably more popular than even he is. And I know, and we do it too, because we look at the data. There are numerous places where we are weaker now in the Trump era than we used to be, because he's weaker with suburban voters than a Republican candidate traditionally is. But there are also places where we are stronger than we used to be because of Trump. Iowa's one of them. We have a large rural population. We have over 30 counties that voted for Obama once or twice, that have voted for Donald Trump twice, and will probably do so thrice here in November. Ohio is another one. Ohio is the most Republican right now the state has ever been. Like, most of our lives, Ohio was the definitive state. I mean, until 2020, every president candidate that won Ohio won the presidency every single time in the history of the state. 2020 was the first time that trend was broken, among many trends, gentlemen, that were broken in 2020, which I'm sure isn't suspicious at all.
Uh-huh.
All right. But this is the most Republican the state has ever been. The Democrats aren't even investing anything seriously in the state. They know they can't win it. So, well, Vance helps with the Rust Belt. He might, but yet, how many people in Michigan and Pennsylvania in Wisconsin knew what a J.D. Vance was? Not many. They're learning right now. So as the campaign goes on, we may find that he was helpful in the Rust Belt. But on the day that he was selected, was he any help in those Rust Belt states? Again, he's a largely unknown figure. I think that Trump bucked this trend because, and I use some of these analogies. They're not always meant to be taken in a negative context. But the Trumps are a royal family. Royal families typically want heirs to keep the royal family going. They don't politically have one right now. Now, if I had to guess, just looking at what we saw at this last convention, Eric Trump looks to me like someone that is either being groomed or is putting himself in position to run for future office. And you'll note that he gave the kind of the keynote of the convention before Daddy got up to speak, where he basically laid out the issue agenda for the Republican Party. Notice that he was the one that gave that speech. I don't think that's a coincidence. And isn't it his wife? Isn't Laura his wife, who's the RNC chair now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there you go. But he's also a neophyte, a novice. He's largely unknown too. Okay, so who is the bridge? Let's say Eric Trump is the one that would, or maybe you think it's Barron. I don't know, but we're still at least a cycle away from an Eric Trump, and you're decades away from a Barron Trump. So then who would be the go-between from these eras? Who would be a bridge to that era? My personal theory is Ron DeSantis was supposed to be that. But then he challenged the king, and that. Now, my understanding is DeSantis and Trump's individual relationship is just fine, and they talk regularly. I heard that from the governor. But that's not the same as the broader political machine. You see what I'm saying? The people that run the social media networks, the advisors, everybody else, there's a lot of soothing to do there. And there's no guarantee that Ron DeSantis would be able to do that. And so I think J.D. Vance, they did buck that trend, not for this election, but future ones. That he's meant to be the heir. MAGA needs an heir, and the Trumps are a royal family. And they don't have one right now, not one that's ready. And so that's what J.D. Vance is about. And that he is, this is an opportunity for him to raise his name ID. He's very close to Tucker and Don Jr. And I think that should be comforting to you in that it indicates that they're in positions of influence that Jared and Ivanka were in before that frustrated us all. That doesn't mean we're going to agree with Tucker and Don Jr. all the time, but they're way closer to people like us, particularly Tucker, obviously. But even Don Jr., he's very involved in a lot of conservative issue causes around the country. They're way closer to people like us than Jared and Ivanka are. And he's their guy. And I think that was clearly a demonstration of their influence, and that Trump recognized he needs an heir, someone that will carry on the MAGA brand. And they don't necessarily have that right now. And I think that's why that trend was bucked. Guys, will have any thoughts on this before we move on?
Yeah, I think DeSantis was an infinitely better choice for VP because he would bring people in from the right and the independent center.
Like our show would sound a lot different in the last week if Ron DeSantis was the VP, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that being said, and I don't know how aware Trump is of this, but I think it's a tell based on the choice of Tim. Well, I know it's a tell. That whether Trump understood that or not, J.D. Vance was a really good pick in terms of securing independence in the center and should give Steve hope for hopefully winning, if that's the bottom line. Because instantly the talking points went out and everybody had to call him weird. And after that, they picked the old ball coach, Tim Walz, Mr. Midwestern Dad. The talking points went out. He was folksy because whether Trump understands it or not, the left understands that math, and they knew they needed somebody to be able to run in what they perceive as the J.D. Vance lane.
Mm-hmm. I could see that too. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Todd hit the nail on the head there regarding J.D. Vance. If they were not worried about, to some degree, what he brought to the table for Donald Trump, they would probably be ignoring him. Now, you could turn around and say, well, he's a liability, and that's why they're trying to make him a focal point. But I don't necessarily think that they necessarily operate like that. So,
is he more of a liability than Trump himself?
No. So, I was with the caveat that we were told a short list involved people like Doug Burgum. J.D. Vance, he's gone through. He's been radicalized after he had a wife, or he got married and had kids. Okay, or came to Christ and had kids. Now, there's a whole thing, about his private life. His wife's a Hindu. He's changed his positions a lot over the years. But in terms of actually being somebody who gets the America First agenda, that's not always a conservative agenda. But in terms of being able to articulate that, and somebody from his background and his backstory, you could have done a heck of a lot worse.
Yeah, you could have.
A heck of a lot worse.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree with that. Here's what I'll also say about JD. I don't know him. I've never met him. Okay? We have something in common in that we both have apparently had all possible positions on Donald Trump you can have on the right in the last 10 years. All right, we've got that in common. Here's what I can also say, though, about him. All of my friends associated with Claremont, Josh Hammer would be one of them. Dave Reboy would be another one of them, okay? Claremont is one of the, I think our Matthew Peterson, I think, came from Claremont. Claremont is one of the last actual think places on the right that actually thinks right. You know what thinks and is right. Okay, the Cato and those places are gone. They're nowhere near what they were in the 80s. They're all, open borders. They've captured and controlled opposition. All right. So of the think tanks on the right that still think, like actually think and are actually on the right, my Claremont folks, I've got several people associated with that place that I know, and I'm on a first name basis with. And a lot of them, frankly, are somewhere from Trump skeptical to hell no. Freaking every single one of them loves J.D. Vance. Loves him. Okay? Not like what Aaron just said. He could have done a lot worse. I mean, like full-throated endorsement adoration. No one bats 1,000, man. Our human nature is what it is. Just did a whole show about that yesterday, right? But that's a pretty damn strong endorsement, man. At least in my line, in my sphere of influence, and I don't have the biggest network, but I got a pretty big one. Being in Iowa for the last 15 years helps with that. I mean, I can't. In my network, that's about as high of an endorsement of my associates that I could get, is that level of unanimous support from those people for J.D. Vance. So I'll say that. Let's go here next to... Actually, let me do this for Jace Medical first, because I want to make sure we get this in about their new contest. You guys know Jace. They've been a huge part of our show the last couple of years with the Jace case, making sure you've got backups of medications that might be the next ones they try to take away from you right when you need them the most, right? Well, they're hosting an exclusive giveaway right now where you can win a Jace case for life. That's right. You could win a Jace case every year for the rest of your life. No purchase necessary to enter. So don't miss out. You can enter this until August 31st. That's the deadline. So enter today from now through August 31st at jace.com/dace. Jase. Jace.com/dace is where you can go to enter. And that's also where you can get your Jace case, by the way. And if you enter the code DACE at checkout, you'll get a discount. Okay? Jace.com to get your Jace case and free of charge. And get a discount with the code DACE. And free of charge, enter the contest for a free Jace case for life. Jace.com/dace. Jase. Jace.com/dace. All right. Mark says, I think Trump actually has some firm ground to stand on with married white women. He should remind them, I will keep your sons off the battlefield and your daughters will never be drafted onto a battlefield with me. As much as the life issue is critical, the living children, when it comes to the life issue, can sometimes be even more relatable. I wholeheartedly agree with this.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right that that's a persuadable point.
Yep.
I think he should push that message as far as is humanly possible, but we just all have to be honest that when we're on the show itself, we're talking about how close we are to existential levels of war and whether we're going to be pushed into it. Some promises simply can't be kept, but I think he should push that message as far as he possibly can.
I agree. There's one in particular here as a follow-up to this I wanted to get to, and now I can't find it, so forgive me. Let's do this with Thomas. How do we as Christians and individuals and any of the other negative world groups deal with the concept of patriotism? When does our view of the country and its corrupt institutions become so infected that the U.S. becomes part of a negative worldview for disenfranchised patriots? This is an excellent question. But it's an excellent question. But the reason I think your confusion here needs clarifying is because you're starting from the wrong premise. Okay? The left likes to say that America that America is an idea. That's a crock. It's a sovereign nation with borders and citizens, okay? But what makes America unique is what Chesterton said, that America is the first country ever founded upon a creed. What is that creed? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and so on and so forth. A creed is not the same thing as an idea. An idea, a creed starts there, but an idea isn't a creed in and of itself. It's an abstract thought. It's amorphous. It can be, I identify as a girl. See what I'm saying? That's an idea, okay? A creed is an idea that has been self-evidently proven so true that it requires a level of obedience to it. Otherwise, you risk all forms of immorality, depravity, disassociation, dysfunction, maybe even your own sanity.
Natural law. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. All right. So the creeds that America was founded on, Thomas, and these are the kinds of questions I need to say this that Thomas mentions. We have to be wrestling with this. And I go back again. Man, as incredible as Seth Gruber was on this show earlier this week, we both thought we needed a Benson and Hedges after that one, Todd.
Mm-hmm.
But I go back also to what John Daniel Davidson, writing in his book Pagan America, what was that, about 4 or 5 months ago on the show? And he pointed out, when America falls, it won't go away. It'll just become evil, like what you're seeing in Western Europe right now. He's right about that. Here's the thing, though. If the landmass carrying the flag of America goes that way, unfortunately, does what about the creeds the country was founded upon? Are they creeds or are they not? Right?
Right.
Is it not self-evident truth that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights? Is that not true?
That's not an American idea. That's
Correct.
God's idea.
Correct. That inalienable means pre-existent is one of the definitions for the term. That's a very Christian biblical worldview ideal, where truth is not conjured, it's discovered. When you think America is an idea, you think truth is conjured. When you think America is a country founded upon a creed, you think truth is discovered. It was always true. I mean, Moses wrote 1,700 years ago in the Septuagint. He created them, male and female, in his image. He created them. So the idea that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that goes way, way back. We're 3,400 years before Thomas Jefferson gets those words ratified in Philadelphia. It was true. So did we make it true that men are created equal, or was that already true?
It was already true.
Look at our Romans study yesterday. We did Romans 3:23 and 3:24, right? Paul writes, without distinction, all have fallen short of the glory of God and sinned, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a statement of equality in terms of equal accountability to God. And Paul writes earlier in Romans, God is no respecter of persons. So it doesn't matter. I mean, it's helpful, but just because you were born into a Christian family does not mean that you will not be an idolater. And just because you were born into an idolatrous family does not mean you will not be converted. And just because you were born into a moral family does not mean you won't be a serial killer. And just because your parents were absolute fiends doesn't mean that you won't go on to be a great missionary. That's what it means. So this was true before it was codified into the Declaration. It just took humanity 5,000 years to come to grips with it. Why? Because we're all fallen and sinful. And we really want to dominate our fellow man. We really don't want to be a brotherhood with them. That's why we're not commanded to love our neighbors or love ourselves, guys, because that's the default setting, but because it's not, okay? And so even if this nation falls and we're under a Romans 1 judgment, are the creeds this nation founded upon still creeds or not?
Of course they are.
Of course they are. Could you find some undiscovered island off the coast of Madagascar, plant a flag, be a pilgrim there, and start a new country that instilled these creeds? Would they still be true there on that island that uncharted island off the coast of Madagascar? Would those still be true?
Yes.
Yes. We don't ever have to. That's why I've never been worried about being patriotic in terms of how it goes against my faith, because what we define as patriotic comes from my faith. Comes from my faith. Without my faith, there's no ideal of patriotism as this country has known it. Now, that doesn't mean there hasn't been patriotism in other countries outside of my faith. And those are places where I would have a conflict. But I don't have to live any differently because of what happens to America. America may treat me differently because of how I live, but I'm going to live by those creeds regardless whether America wants to live by them any longer or not. Amen?
Amen.
Because that is the natural revealed law for all of creation from the Creator who makes the rain fall on the just and unjust alike. You guys want to chime in on that? Add, subtract, multiply, divide?
Yeah, my patriotism, I mean, to say it's at an all-time low, I don't know, doesn't even do it justice. But, like, listen, in the absence of patriotism, my duty as a man of God, as a husband and a father, is to look for fights I can win and benefit from. And not recognize them. Not just try to, but not to avoid a fight altogether. That's true whether my country is healthy or not. I've got other duties, even if the flag falls or gets turned upside down. My job is to protect them, to give them a future if I can. And just several months ago, when I was talking about how this is the least important election of our lifetimes, honestly, it's because day to day, it's like the whole notion, I can't fight for you any harder than you're willing to fight for yourself. Mm-hmm. But my God, it was just a day to day of just slap fighting, high school angst nonsense. I can't stand it. But yes, here in the last month, there's been real fight. And I don't apologize for my nature. I'm good at it, and I like it, and I want in. All right? And I can see with very real clarity that when it's going to benefit those I love the most. And I won't apologize for it. And if you don't have that to fight for, and if you think you can just sit this in Netflix and chill, okay. But no, on my end. I see exactly what needs to be done in the name of my family, and I don't apologize for it at all.
Yeah, family was exactly where I was going to go with that. So where I am right now, let's put it in terms of pronouns when it comes to my patriotism. Growing up, pronouns when it came to my patriotism were we, us, okay? Now it's more along the lines of they, them, okay? Kind of the same way that I did this when I was younger. I don't refer to my favorite sports teams as we, us. I still, even my favorite ones, it's they, them. It's still a part from me. It's not that embedded in my identity. That's kind of how I define patriotism now. I just don't feel a whole lot of we, us right now, okay? Now, we need to be careful not to confuse patriotism with jingoism. And hey, if we can have a little bit of jingoism if we could see that again in our lifetimes, that'd be a nice, fun luxury, wouldn't it? But here's the bottom line, and here's where the rubber meets the road. Personally, if you love your posterity, you will love your country. And what do I mean by posterity? What is the only posterity that really matters? It is your spiritual patriarchy but it's your spiritual inheritance and your flesh and blood inheritance, or your flesh and blood posterity. If you love your family, if you love your children and your children's future children, you will love your country. Because, and again, in our Americanized language, we don't know what love is anymore. But you will love your country. You will want what is best for your country because you want what is best for your children. And sometimes what's best for your country is by having a lot of children, actually. And, you know, there's a lot of us who are doing our darndest to make that happen. But the bottom line is this: if you want the best for your family because you love them, you're going to want what is best for your country. You will love it.
Amen. Speaking of family, Focus on the Family is there to support you every step of the way during these turbulent times. Jim Daly connects you to biblically sound advice on marriage and parenting that is relatable, practical, genuinely interesting. If you are looking for that kind of encouragement, especially after you're done listening to us, you might think, yes, after I listen to your show, Dace, I need some encouragement. All right, Focus on the Family with JimDaly.com is where you can go to get this podcast. You won't regret it. Focus on the Family with Jim Daly, D-A-L-Y is how that is spelled. And of course, you guys all know Focus on the Family. It's been an institution in terms of teaching and advancing a biblical worldview for many, many decades now. Focus on the Family with JimDaly.com is where you want to go. Again, that's Focus on the Family with JimDaly.com. Let me stress a couple of quick points, though, more about the email. We do need to come to grips with the fact civil disobedience is going to be on the table. In fact, it is right now. We're just not fully prepared yet and haven't been prepped by the church yet to activate it. But the knock on the door is coming. You are going to get the knock on the door. You're going to have to say no. I can't do that. I won't do that. You can't have my kids. No, I won't comply. I won't. The idea that there's going to be elections, I strongly don't believe this is the one, but I also don't think this is something like 25 years down the road. But the idea that there will be national elections without revival or without some form of political turning of the tide here, where both sides are like, well, yeah, we're for changing the kids. We just won't make you a tax. We won't just tax it and taxpayer subsidize it. Things we can't possibly support as Christians. We just can't do it. That will happen in a godless society. Yeah. When the enemy feels like he has the advantage, he will try to take particularly those of us who are resistant and put us in Lady or the Tiger positions, Hobbes choices. We need to be ready for that. We need to anticipate that. That is the history of the church. Okay? Plenty of martyred saints, all for the same reason. They said no. No, we won't comply. No, we won't take part. But I do know that if we start acting like we're there now, that'll create a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're not there yet. We're closer than I think many people want to admit. But we're not there yet. But I do think we need to be prepared. This is what happens to godless societies. All the stuff that we lamented for decades, we just gave them control of the schools. We just gave them control of pop culture. We just did this. We just did that. You know, we said those things, but I think we also thought that like the consequences for them were going to be like way off, right? Well, to quote Obama's former pastor, America's chickens are coming home to roost. They are. Right now. We're reaping that bitter harvest right now. More in a moment.
The Steve Deace Show.
All right, let's get back to some Feedback Friday. This note from Mindy, Christ follower, homeschool mom. She writes, I, like many other ladies, have become a regular listener because of my husband. While it did take me a couple of weeks to really get what he saw in you guys. We laugh because we get that a lot. And the conversations you have took even longer to realize which voice belonged to Todd and Aaron. I am now in. I'm a homeschooled mom who feels that my calling is to disciple our children full time. Someone will be indoctrinating our kids, and my husband and I are determined for that to be us. Amen. I appreciate Todd's call to be bold and make a stand whenever we can. I recently learned of Kirk Cameron's See You at the Library initiative and felt that God was calling me to be a part of that. Last year, Kirk Cameron partnered with Brave Books Publishing and wrote a book about the fruit of the Spirit. He then reached out to several libraries in 2023 to host a story hour. 50 libraries denied his request to read a pro-God, pro-America book. But he reached out to them again, stating our First Amendment rights, and 13 libraries changed their minds and allowed him to come. Thus, See You at the Library was born. Cameron is collaborating with publisher Brave Books to organize See You at the Library again this year. All over America, parents are signing up to host events this year at their libraries. We could always use more volunteers to host or support local events. At first, I was really fired up to be a part, and then the enemy tried his best to put any doubt or fear he could to think of it in my way. Or any doubt or fear he could think of in my way. It worked for a little while, but prayer and seeking the Lord's will showed me that the enemy was wrong. God has been giving me signs that I was on the right path to start with. Sermon messages, Sunday school lessons, friends' encouragement, scripture readings have all seemed to say, be committed to the Lord and do what he is calling you to do. He will be with you. Just do it. I hope you guys will share about See You at the Library with your audience and encourage others to participate at their local libraries. The official date of See You at the Library is August 24th. Again, August 24th. They even have kits that people can sponsor to provide Brave Books to hosts. However, this isn't necessary. The main goal is for parents to host a story hour at their local libraries and to read pro-God, pro-American books to the children in their communities. So if you guys are looking for information on this, all right, bravebooks.us is where you can go. There's a link there. All right, for See You, or just Google See You at the Library. But See You at the Library, bravebooks.us is a link. Bravebooks.us is a link. And again, that's from Mindy, Christ follower and homeschool mom. And she writes, side note, a teenager in our homeschooled community chose a passage from Nefarious to message and quote at one of our events. If I hadn't already wanted to read it, I was even more convinced then. I love stuff like this because this is stuff we can do. And this doesn't require, I don't understand either, man. I don't know. I have no idea. Your opponents are trying to shoot you and put you in prison. And in the middle of a press conference yesterday, Trump's still fire and blast at Brian Kemp. I don't get it either, man. I don't know, man. Okay? I don't. This we can do.
Maybe I should have been a meteorologist after all. Would have better helped me address or assess Trump.
But this is the kind of stuff we can do, and other people's idiosyncrasies and distractions. Our theme this year is dominion, right? This is stuff we can do, is what Mindy is suggesting. We can all do this. And I get emails from more and more of you. What can I do? Here's one thing you can do right here. See You at the Library. Just Google it. See You at the Library, Kirk Cameron. Or you can go to bravebooks.us, books plural, bravebooks.us. We can all do that. Absolutely. So I love this kind of practical stuff. Thank you, Mindy. Elise has a lament I hear a lot. I watched the episode over the 4th of July where you guys played the Choice 42 video on abortion. And since that is the one thing I've been the most passionate about all my life, aside from my faith, I sobbed after watching it. I volunteered at a Christian pregnancy center near me, but still feel like I can be doing more. My husband watched the video and was disgusted by it, as I was, but he couldn't understand why I would post it on my social media. I think he tends to see me as radical in a bad way and inflammatory. Well, I see it as the only way to be in this day and age, especially when it comes to raising children. I get angry when he responds this way or doesn't get as fired up and action-oriented. I'm struggling with being the submissive wife I should be and also trying to inspire him to be bold and actually take action. I shared that I want him to be the one to spur our family on, and I just don't think it clicks for him. If it wasn't for me, I'm not even sure he'd be a registered voter. He's making progress, but I'm still frustrated and not sure what to do. Any godly wisdom would be appreciated. Here's the first thing I would tell you to do. And let me just pick a period of time arbitrarily, Elise. And all the other women in this audience that are prepared to write this note, because I have gotten it a lot. Okay?
That's sad.
take the next 2 weeks, because a few days, it's not a discipline yet. Take the next 2 weeks and resolve that I am going to pray for my husband and his boldness and his leadership and his fire, and that God will mold, urge, convict, prompt, prod him to be the man that I know God created him to be. For 2 weeks, do that. And then if nothing happens in 2 weeks, do it 2 weeks more. And then just keep doing it. But that's what I would do. You're doing several of the practical things I would have suggested already. You're engaging him. You're letting your voice be heard. Okay? You don't want to get into the position, and I can tell by your tone at least, you don't want to do this. You don't want to get in the position where you're shaming him, okay? Nagging him, manipulating him, because then he's doing what you want, but for the wrong reasons. And it'll be satisfactory at first, but it'll then grate on you later on. So I'd take it to the Lord, and I'd be praying for him to be that leader. And then while you're doing that, make sure you praise him in the areas where he is doing and being the man he was called to be. So it doesn't seem like it's never good enough either. The reason being is otherwise he'll get defensive and look for excuse. Oh, you can never be pleased. I did this, you didn't bring it up. I did this, you didn't talk about it. So because I'm not as fired up about what you're fired up about, I'm a terrible husband or father, he'll get defensive. Don't do that either. So make sure to give him the propers that he has earned in the other areas. I mean, I would assume he's good in some other areas. Otherwise, you wouldn't still be married. Okay? So in the other areas where he is being the man that you want him to be, make sure you give him his propers for that. And in this area particularly, I would, instead of engaging him for a couple of weeks on it, do your thing. You be faithful unto the Lord yourself. But when it comes to engaging him, I'd actually, instead of that, I'd pray more. You guys want to add anything to this? You okay with that answer?
I'm okay with it. Obviously, we are challenged when letters like this are written that we don't have all of the details.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to be surprised. My bet is your husband is way too comfortable, and that there's a level of emotional bandwidth that he's more than ready to give to very, very trivial things that he won't give to this. And so I think on your part, I think in ways that might, if you yourself change, get uncomfortable in ways that might make him look and say, what's this all about? And you know what your things are, the things that you're really interested, but if you purposefully, visibly change, pull away from those things, again, could be fashion, home decor, what you buy, any number of things like this, so that he takes notice, it might lead to a real conversation.
That's a great point. We don't know Elise, right?
No.
But let's just give an example, all right? Let's say, Amazon is well aware of your address, just as an example.
Yes.
Don't know Elise, but let's say the Amazon driver in your neighborhood is not unfamiliar with your address, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe if your husband found out the Amazon delivery driver is going to be here a few less weeks because I'm going to give that money to preborn instead. Something like that? That kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
And again, you're demonstrating your own conviction to him and allowing him to then kind of connect some dots maybe on his own.
Yes. And
that's really good.
Only you know what that is. We don't know.
Yeah. But that's really good. Yeah.
I would I'm sorry that you're in this position. As best as you can without being condescending or infantilizing. We're pretty simple creatures. If there is ever any evidence of, hey, there's a glimmer of taking initiative here. There's a glimmer of being bold. Reward, We kind of operate on a rewards-based system. So whatever that is, positive reinforcement, that's a good thing. We don't, at least not from women, or at least not from our wives. Negative reinforcement, not the greatest thing. And again, it's hard to do it in a non-condescending or non-infantilizing way. But if you can keep reinforcing, I like that. I'm attracted to that, whatever that is, whether it's just a glimmer of, again, initiative, a glimmer of boldness. Do that to the best of your abilities. Again, relationships are not arts, they're not sciences, they're relationships. And so I'm not going to tell you a specific way to reward that behavior, but keep that in the back of your mind. And I just pray for you as well that someday you're going to turn around and you're like, whoa, he's further ahead than I am. I got to keep up with him now. I pray that's your story someday. And hopefully someday soon.
And that's an excellent point, too. Here's something Elise did not tell us, and if you're a woman in this situation, let us apply it broadly. Is it that he is struggling with taking initiative in general, or just in this one arena, okay? Because there's two different, things here. If we're talking in general, then, that's especially where the prayerful area the prayerful approach that I advocated would come into play. If it's just this area, maybe he's got a job where he's afraid of if you're being really radical and the blowback or something, you know what I'm saying? Okay. In the areas where he does take initiative, to what Aaron, you just pointed out, I'd be very rewarding of that. I would, newsflash, okay? If you ladies don't know this, the number one person on earth, from the moment you guys walk that aisle together, the number one person on earth your husband wants the approval of is you. From that moment forward, it's you. Number one person he wants the approval of. So, letting him know, not to get him to do what you want, but when he does what you want him to do in these areas. Those are two different things. See what I'm saying? Okay. One is where you're manipulating him. Don't do that.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. The other is where he is stepping up as a man. When you can let him know, I find that very attractive. I want to reward that behavior. Okay. But you're rewarding it after he takes the initiative to do it, so that you're incentivizing more of it. Not that you tricked him or cornered or manipulated him into it. Okay.
Because and it sounds like your motivations are pure here.
Correct.
And that is the biggest thing. And we don't know what they are because we're not God. But as long as you're checking your motivations every step of the way.
Correct. But guys, I won't have time to get to it today looking at the clock. I've got 2 or 3 more of these kinds of notes. I mean, I get these a lot. And so I want to also say this to the ladies in the audience. You are not alone. You're not the only lady wondering, what do I got to do to light the pilot here? Okay. What do I got to do where are the jumper cables for the battery here? This is a chronic problem. And this goes back to something I said on the show last week. It's one of the reasons why we take such a confrontational tone when discussing these things. It's one of the reasons why Todd is so in your face about this. And as I said last week, because some of you ladies are like, wow, Todd's really, really getting aggressive. And I get that. You're a woman. We shouldn't talk to you that way. I get that. If you think Todd talks to his 4 daughters and wife that way, you haven't been around Todd, all right? But we are not like you, and the men do need to be talked to that way. That is how the men must be reached. They've already heard the soft sell. They've already seen the softer side of Sears, okay? They must be confronted. Men have to be confronted. We're different than you, okay? We need to be confronted by other men. The soft approach won't typically work. Doesn't mean that there's never a soft approach, When your husband's dad dies, hey man, get off your ass. That's not what we're talking about. Men who are docile rather than agile, mobile, and hostile. Men who are complacent. Men who have their idols. Men who can see the fight is right in front of them and can't be bothered. Right? Though in that condition, they have to be confronted, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to prod them. All right, guys. We're down to about the 3-minute warning here. You guys get the closing thoughts. Go ahead.
Well, it's been an interesting couple of days here. There seems to be a new phase of the the fight on the right for what is this all about? What are we fighting for? Who's our standard bearer? I'm glad it finally came to some kind of head. I don't know if it's going to come to a good resolution, but it did have to come to some kind of head for us to move forward in a very narrow window of time. It's just like after with the recount, and we were begging on this show, guys, we don't have time for the Kraken thing. We need to get to this thing, and I'm glad we're working through whatever we're trying to work through now.
Indeed, and we really don't know. That's evergreen tweet. We don't have a good pulse on whatever it is we're looking at in our culture, but I'm thinking politically right now. You know, we made our predictions about how this election would go if it were today, and you know, three of us were kind of on one side, and Josh, who has a track record of being right with some of these types of things, he was on the other side. This is a chaotic time. The antidote to chaos is not more chaos, and that starts at a personal level, at a granular level. Make sure you personally are keeping first things first. And for all of us, that's different. You know, it could just be as simple as I'm making sure I'm in God's word every day. But it's not stopping there. Putting some boots on those feet and actually going and doing God's word. Whether that's serving in your community, serving in your church, serving your family, of course, that's a non-negotiable. But again, this week was more proof that we really we're making the mistake of, is it the book of James talking about we're going to go do this, that, and the other thing, and how that's folly? This week was another indication of that. So the message, as always, as it has been this entire year on this show, take dominion over your life. Okay? With God as your protector, as your North Star, take dominion over what you can take dominion of. We'll be back at it again on Monday. Until then, Romans 8:28.